Hi there, I'm Kate Griggs, and this is the D.Spot, a brand new Vodcast podcast series that boldly redefines dyslexia. We're bringing together inspirational educators, industry disruptors, and passionate change makers, many made by dyslexia. We'll reveal all there is to know about the ins and outs of dyslexic thinking and why the world needs more of it right now. Inspiring, informative, surprising conversations set on creating change. In this episode, we are so excited to be joined by the cyber spy agency GCHQ, where, according to their director, Jeremy Fleming, dyslexic thinking is mission critical for GCHQ. So there are 5 reasons why dyslexics make great spies, and it's all based on their dyslexic thinking skills and their dyslexic strengths. Seeing the big picture, spotting patterns in events and data or communication, seeing things differently, finding different solutions to things, thinking laterally and using their intuition to solve impenetrable digital puzzles, and simplifying complex info and analysing data. So joining us today will be Joe, who is the Director of Strategy at GCHQ, Charlotte, who is an intelligence analyst, and Rob, who's a transformational innovator. Rob and Charlotte are both spies, so we won't see them on camera, we will see an avatar. And I'm hoping they'll be able to share a lot about what they do, but I'm sure you'll understand that some of what they say is going to be secret, so they may have to be a little bit guarded in what they say in the conversations. So let me start with Joe, if I may. Thank you so much for joining us today. GCHQ is shrouded in secrecy, as you'd expect, as you're an intelligence agency. But could we kick off today by you giving us a little bit of an insight into what GCHQ actually does?
Of course. Thanks, Kate. And it's great to be talking to you again about dyslexia. So GCHQ is an intelligence, cyber and security agency with a mission to keep the UK safe. And our brilliant people use cutting-edge technology and ingenuity to identify and analyse and disrupt threats. And that could be anything from preventing terrorist attacks through to protecting the public from serious crimes, such as online fraud that you might have heard a bit about during COVID, or helping children stay safe online, or any work to do with cybersecurity. So our National Cybersecurity Centre is all about helping to make the UK the safest place to live and do business online. So we have a range of different missions. And you say we're kind of shrouded in mystery, and it is true that we're an intelligence agency, and so we do hold a lot of secrets and we do have to protect those secrets. But we're not actually a secretive organisation. We're quite open. We've got a Twitter account, an Instagram account, a website now. So it's kind of bold new world, if you like, where we're doing a lot more openly, talking to the public about things just like this today.
It's fantastic. It's just so interesting to understand what GCHQ does, but also the history behind it, because Alan Turing, who is famous for the Enigma, he actually was made by dyslexia, and the relationship with dyslexia goes, and people who think differently, goes right back to the start of GCHQ. Can you tell us a little bit about the history?
Well, that's absolutely right. We were actually 100 years old last year. We had our 100th birthday. And ever since our inception, we've really valued people who can think differently. A lot of the work we do is about tackling, really challenging problems and about solving complex issues. And these challenges require people who do think differently, and often people who think differently really thrive in those roles. And as you mentioned at the start, Jeremy, our director, has said that it's mission critical for us. And since our inception, we have looked to hire individuals who are neurodiverse, and we have a thriving neurodiverse community.
And just in terms of how vital you think dyslexia and GCHQ actually will be as you look into the future. We were absolutely fascinated to see the announcement about the National Cyber Force intelligence agencies all coming together, with GCHQ playing a huge part in that. Tell us a little bit about that. It's really fascinating.
That's right. Well, I think I'd say our work probably couldn't be more relevant today. We've got a really important role to play in securing the nation. If you look at the advent of technology and how the world has changed and gone digital, and even more so, that's accelerated because of COVID, we've got a vital role to play to safeguard the public and to safeguard and protect businesses and the healthcare sector and other kind of critical national infrastructure. And you talked about the announcement recently on the National Cyber Force. That's a new partnership between intelligence and defence, with a set of capabilities that will really transform the UK's ability to contest our adversaries in cyberspace. All the more important now the world is going online and going digital.
Absolutely amazing. It's incredible to hear all of these things. So can I jump to you for a minute, Charlotte, because I know that what you do as somebody who works in the 24/7 centre is really look across all of those communications that are happening on the cyber level. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at GCHQ?
Yeah, so as an intelligence analyst, I work in a 24/7 operations centre. And I can't go into too much detail on what I do, but I can say that I'm an analyst working on some of the biggest incidents threatening the UK. I'm often looking through a lot of data, and I find that my dyslexia helps me to see the bigger picture and spot patterns that aren't always obvious to everyone else around me. I also find that my approach to finding solutions is very different. I often think quite fast and outside of the box, and this is key to my job.
And presumably, I mean, just thinking about all of the billions and billions of pieces of communication that are happening around the world, that's what your 24/7 centre is looking at, isn't it? So that it must be really critical that you're looking at those gaps and spotting all the connections.
Yeah, it's also really cool to be working in that job doing this work. I really didn't think that's what I would be doing when I joined.
Fantastic. And the other thing, Rob, that I wanted to pick up with you on is that I think what I didn't truly understand until I started doing the research is how much of a role GCHQ has working with the military and actually keeping our troops safe. So it's not just about keeping the country safe and all of the things that we've discussed. There's a big emphasis on working with the army and making sure that they're safe. And I know your role as at GCHQ did involve working with the military at some point. Is that right?
Yes, so I spent quite a few years deploying with the military. I was very fortunate to get a number of campaign medals, so I do have a range of medals that I can never wear anywhere, but I do have a range of them. The kids know about them, but that's it. And that's along with about 300 other staff within the organisation who've done that. So I spent a lot of time, but used my dyslexic skills to spot opportunities of how we could do things differently. And I, as the innovator, I had spent a lot of time talking to people internally who invent stuff, and also a lot of contacts out with industry, and find ways that we could use capabilities that were never planned to do what we use them for, and then use them to deliver amazing effects. So, I spent the time I spent out in the Balkans and Iraq and stuff like that, quite active places. They were entertaining, not what you'd normally expect of a civil servant, and basically changed the way we did it. Then I was able to communicate that very much as a story, not write it down, because my writing is appalling, still is, never solved that one. But I could tell a good story and convince the leaders in the military and HQ that we could do things differently. And from there, I went on to build loads of stuff that we trialed on exercises, and really changed how we produce and deliver the intelligence that enables forces to be effective, as well as keeping them safe, which is very important.
And as your job as transformational innovator, that is just such a cool title. You're finding problems, aren't you? And I know this is often said of dyslexic people, that they can actually spot problems that people didn't even know we had, and then find the solutions. That must be really, really fascinating. Can you give us an example of where you've done that?
So obviously some of the most recent big changes that have hit us around COVID, where we had to change our mission posture. Some people who were enabling more people to work from home or other locations to enable them to carry on working effectively. I can't go into a lot of detail on exactly what we've done, but there's some pretty cool technology that we've developed, invented and innovated on to make us an effective organisation in a much more distributed way.
And having had the privilege of actually visiting GCHQ headquarters, I can imagine the amount of transformation and innovation that it took to have a lot of those spies and staff actually working remotely in different areas, and yet still being able to deliver on all of the missions that you so critically run for us. So, Joe, if I can come back to you. So we've established the fact that dyslexic thinking is mission critical for GCHQ, and that it's always been something that has been important. Can we dig a little bit into that, and can you explain why you think it's so important, and give us some examples, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about our role to kind of identify, analyze and disrupt threats. And that operational work is all about how do we solve really complex problems. And these types of challenges require people that can connect ideas, that can think visually, that can use their intuition, for example. And we see those qualities in a lot of our dyslexic colleagues. And Charlotte talked a bit about her intelligence analyst role, and some of the key qualities we look for there are those I've just mentioned. And actually, the less people think in a similar way, the better they often are at those types of roles. So it's something we really look for when we're hiring people.
It's fascinating, really, isn't it? Because you realise actually how GCHQ and your recruiting and the way you think about different intelligences has been leading the way for a very long time. But we now know from our research with EY that the dyslexic thinking skills that come so naturally to us are vital for the future of work. So it seems to be, everybody is catching up with the thought process that we need people who do things differently, not people who do things the same.
That's absolutely right. And I think some of our most talented and creative people in the organisation, are dyslexic or have a neurodiverse profile. And if I think about my own staff officer, he's not in an operational role at the moment, but the qualities he brings are incredible to the role he's performing at the moment in my team. The way he is so creative and comes up with new ideas and ways to spin things differently. And his communication skills and the way he connects and empathizes with people and builds relationships, they're huge strengths that are vitally important.
Yes, well, they're vitally important in everything we're learning now, which is it's why it's so important, and why we are so passionately as a charity pushing the fact that we've got to see strengths first, because that's the most important thing. Just Charlotte, if we could come on to you and what you think your dyslexic strengths are. I know we've touched on them before, but can you give us some examples of where you think your dyslexic thinking has helped you to achieve or see things others can't?
Yeah, so I can often spot patterns that my colleagues can't see. Can often spot obvious gaps that my colleagues can't see as well. And in my team, in a 24-hour centre, we have a lot of problems that we need to try and solve. We have a lot of different ways to tackle a problem. And I think one of my biggest strengths I bring to the team is I have a completely different perception of things. So there's another unique way to try and fix a problem. I can't go into too many specifics of what I've done because of what my job role is, but I regularly have to look through large amounts of data And from being dyslexic, I can quickly process and pull out the vital information.
So it's fascinating. There's so many patterns within dyslexic thinking. It doesn't matter what sphere you're in or what you do that are the same. I was really interested to hear Al, a senior member of GCHQ, described his dyslexic thinking as he can see hundreds and hundreds of different bits of information, and suddenly they all come together. They all just come together and gel, and it's a bit like, I think he said something like it's like a spark or a light bulb moment. And that's exactly what happens with me when I'm trying to, I think one of my strengths is communication, and storytelling. And if I'm trying to work out the best way of communicating something, it is like looking at a big picture, seeing all of this information, and then it just like comes together as a sort of light bulb moment. Would you say that that's similar with your thinking, Charlotte? And I know you can't go into details about what you're actually thinking about or give us too much information, but is that the kind of process that happens with you?
Yeah, so I didn't actually realise that was how my brain worked until Al said it. And then it was kind of like, oh, yeah, I do the same thing. So I'm a shift worker as part of my job role in a 24/7 centre. And sometimes you can spend a whole shift working on one thing, and then it'll be an hour left to go, and you go, now it all makes sense. That's what the thing is. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's very, very cool. And I think also it's the ability to be able to look at something and the solution is so clear. But if somebody asks you why you know that's the solution, it's almost impossible to explain to them, because you're using instinct, you're using a whole range of different senses, but you can just see what that answer is. Does that happen for you too?
Yeah, so I work it's a big team, and I'm not the only dyslexic in the team, but you can really tell who is dyslexic or who is neurodiverse, because there's a lot of us that are like that.
Yeah, it's terribly difficult though when you try and put that into a school situation or an education situation, or even if you're working for an employer that needs to see the process of how you've got to the solution, and it's difficult to explain it. Whereas I think at GCHQ, because you're needing to find those answers quickly and just see the gaps quickly, and there's such a history of knowing that works, you're free to explore that dyslexic thinking, which must be really exciting, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I think the level of trust that we have as well is it's really important, just to let us get on and do our jobs.
Yeah, well, it's just believing in that superpower that is dyslexic thinking, really, isn't it? And Rob, how about you? Do you have a similar sort of process or feeling, or when I'm just trying to get to help the audience to understand what dyslexic thinking feels like as a process?
Yeah, so I really get the point about the light bulb moment and all of that. I spend a lot of my time talking to people about different capabilities, things they're building, encouraging them to build it for what they're doing. But then what it comes to is there'll be a light bulb moment, and happened a lot with the military stuff that I was doing. There were things that people were building back in the office that had no concept that it could be used in a different way. A lot of those are very sensitive and I can't go into them. But one of the cool things, the team that I was with, had the idea of and built on, and it ended up being the big container that was at the front of the Science Museum was one of my babies. Exactly what's in it, can't go into, but that container and why it exists and the field office that it capability was one of the things that I started. Quite proud of that. It's another really cool thing. But it is, people come back and ask, well, why? How did you get to that answer? And you can answer, don't know. It just is the answer, and you can explain why it's a really good answer, but not how you get there. And that sometimes can be a challenge. But as long as you can tell a good story and why it's going to work for someone, that's great. And it was really successful. But it is all that part of the team, the complementary skills as well. But organising it, because making everything happen in the right order, not quite so good at that bit. Knowing that it's the right thing to do, definitely can do that bit.
And Rob, that's a really great plug there. Thank you for our Science Museum exhibition, which we had in London last year for our 100th anniversary, and we're moving it up to Manchester Science and Industry Museum. So it's a great place to go and explore the last 100 years of GCHQ. There's loads of cool exhibits to play around with and just learn a bit about our history and our people.
And another plug, of course, for you is the incredible book that you've just released, which is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. We ran a competition on our social media channels to give some of them away, and we were just blown away by the responses to it. So yeah, it's an awesome book. So Joe, if we can come back to you and have a chat about recruitment. So what does GCHQ do that is so different to help to recruit these minds? And also, I'd really love to talk to you about your apprenticeship scheme, because I gather there's a huge percentage or over-representation of dyslexic people joining that.
That's right. So with our recruitment, we're obviously absolutely committed to getting people with dyslexia and other neurodiverse individuals into the organisation and helping them to have successful careers, and really helping them to thrive in the organisation. So a lot of it is about creating the culture to enable that to happen, and to make sure that we're overcoming some of the barriers that there might be to progression. So I suppose the first thing on recruitment, part of the reason we're here talking to you today is not just because we're passionate about this, but because this is a great way for us to become more known as a neurodiverse employer, and a great way for us to help us to attract talent. And there are various things that we do in our recruitment process, various skills that we look for depending on the role. So we've talked a bit about the analyst role and some of those analytical thinking skills that we might be testing and looking at during that recruitment. And we're also really open to making adjustments throughout our recruitment process. For example, things like, letting people know they can take notes, bring mind maps into the interview, having a facility where they can park questions until later, making sure they can have extra time, or that we're not bombarding candidates by asking multiple questions at the same time. So there are all sorts of adjustments that when people apply, and if they feel happy and able to kind of disclose that they're dyslexic, we can make all of those adjustments to help them to thrive throughout our recruitment process. And then that flows through into our workplace as well. There's lots of different workplace adjustments that we can make. And then also support groups. I know Charlotte is a co-chair of our Think Differently group, which I'm sure she can talk about. And from my point of view, that's a really important group, because they constantly challenge us and educate us as an organisation, and help to create that supportive environment and help us to continue to improve and do better across these areas.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you're actually you actively look for dyslexic recruits, and that's a great place to come to you, Charlotte, because I believe that you joined GCHQ after you saw a piece in the media that talked about how how GCHQ were looking for dyslexic spies. Is that right?
Yeah. So if you'd like, I'll just go into a little bit of the background of how I joined.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at school, I had the support without an official diagnosis. They just kind of assumed I was dyslexic, and that was good enough. And that got me through GCSEs and A-levels. And then I went to university, and first year was okay. Second year started to struggle, and that was just mostly timings and exams. So I did computer science. So there's a lot of writing code by hand, which is harsh anyway to expect anyone to do. And to get the diagnosis, I needed to pay, I think it was about £300 for the assessment, which I didn't have. I was living in, I think it was the most expensive city at the time for students. And around the time of having to try and find the money for the assessment, I found an article about GCHQ looking to employ, I think it was 100 dyslexic spies. And I put my application in just sort of half as a joke, thinking they wouldn't take me without a complete degree. But they took me, and I'm here, and I'm really happy that I took that massive gamble.
That's incredible, and it's wonderful that you've actually your co-chair, I think, isn't it, of the Think Different group, which is, I think that's the other thing that's so amazing about GCHQ is the incredible support. But obviously, you have so many dyslexic employees and employees with different neurodivergencies that it's important for you to have those support groups. But it is very much being open to those minds and needing those minds in the first place, and then making sure that the support is there. Rob, you've been with GCHQ for a while, so I would imagine the recruitment process was not quite as forward thinking when you applied. But having said that, they have employed dyslexics from the get-go, so they must have been doing something right.
Yeah, so I had some challenges. I mean, I'd known I was dyslexic from quite early, so late 70s, early 80s, I got diagnosed, which is quite early. So I've known for a long time. I've done a couple of other jobs. I was a sailing instructor for a while. I did work for a small firm that did taxi control rooms. So think of it as a very early version of Uber, late 90s, putting GPS tags in things. I was tempted to be a programmer. Didn't work very well because I couldn't spell the variables. Apparently, if you don't spell the variables differently all the way through the thing, it doesn't work. But what I was really good at was visualizing in 3D. So I was very good at fitting all the radio equipment into the cabs and the GPS system. So I spent the whole time taking cars apart and putting them back together, which was great fun. When I applied, it was a handwritten form, which really wasn't going to go very well. So actually, they had a nice yellow covered paper as well, just to make it a bit more difficult. So I went and found the matching colour of yellow paper, hunting around the shops to apply. Photocopied it and then sat there. Those of you who remember WordPerfect 5.1 for DOS, I sat there and filled out with advanced codes because it wasn't, being able to draw on the picture at the time with computers, and printed it all out. So I actually printed my whole application, which was very, very unusual at the time, and got to an interview. From then, it was very different. It was the Cold War, very secret organisation, but it's been great going through. It's not always been brilliant. There have been times, where the coping strategies don't work. So I rely totally on voice recognition because it's the only way I can spell properly, and it's great most of the time. But if I have a cold, it gets it wrong. So I have on occasions signed off emails as crocodile, and then people have come around and asked, Rob, are you really cross with us today or something? And it's just that the voice recognition's got it wrong. And it has a good chuckle now and then, and there are quite a few stories of some of the things I've written that are quite amusing. But when the coping mechanisms do go wrong, it can be sort of falling off a cliff. It's quite a fine balance. And one of the great things about GCHQ is the employee assistance and stuff. I have fallen off a few times and got in some quite dark places, but there is a safety net there that will come in and help, and I've moved to a better job and then done some amazing things. When I get in the right place, it is brilliant. It's just walking that knife edge sometimes can get a bit hard, and relatively small things like having a cold, for example, you might feel a bit crap, but just suddenly your world ability to cope falls apart because the assistive tech doesn't quite work, which is an unusual challenge, I suppose. But
most of the time it's good.
Oh, most of the time, yeah. We get in the right place, it's brilliant. It's just sometimes it's, that, and then there's safety nets there to help. And that's what's great, because there's so many different roles you can do in the organisation. It's brilliant because you go on and do something different, and you haven't had to jump employer and have all the extra stress as well. So they're really good at that.
No, it's fantastic. Joe, apprentices. That sounds like the most amazing thing to be encouraging young people to do, to join your apprenticeship scheme. Tell me, there's an amazing statistic, isn't there, about how the percentage of overrepresentation with dyslexics in that scheme?
That's right. We've got a really thriving apprenticeship scheme. We hire lots of apprentices every year, and we really encourage people to, young people to think about coming in, without going to university. You don't have to have had a degree, as Charlotte's kind of talked about. And on our apprenticeship schemes, we understand that our apprentices, they're around 3 or 4 times more likely to be dyslexic than across when you compare them to other apprenticeship schemes. So again, it just shows that we're really attracting that type of talent, and some of the strengths that come with that are really mission critical for us.
So for any young person wanting to apply, what do they need to do?
So we've got a website and we advertise regularly lots of different jobs all around our locations in the UK. So you can pop onto our website, have a look at what we're advertising. If we're not advertising at that moment, you can also have a look at some of our online courses. We run cyber first courses and lots of different work with schools and young people. So there's lots of other opportunity for summer schools or cyber first courses as well.
Amazing. And I would imagine that that recruitment process and the number of people you're recruiting is only going to increase. As we know, we've touched on how vital your work is going to be now and into the future. So
that's right.
Great opportunities for young people. So as a final thought, our mission is to redefine dyslexia, to help the world understand dyslexia for the amazing strengths and value that it brings to the world. So if I could just come to each of you and ask you, as one final thought for our viewers and listeners, what would you like the world to know about dyslexia? And shall we start with you, Charlotte, on that?
Yep. So I think being dyslexic is nothing to be ashamed of. Your superpowers are unique to you, and you can use them to your advantage to achieve great things.
Fantastic. And Rob, can you tell us what you would like the world to know?
I think I'm very much a Made by Dyslexia. I've done amazing things and had amazing opportunities, and you really can succeed as a dyslexic and do unique and special things. And just to highlight at the end, as my daughter says, about the only cool thing I've done as a boring old git is that I did get an OBE for my work thing, and I had a day visiting the Queen at the Palace, which is one of the highlights that you can get to with dyslexia.
Oh, amazing. Congratulations. That's fantastic. And then if we can just end with you, Jo, what would you like the world to know?
So I would say that dyslexia is absolutely a strength. And without people who are made by dyslexia working at GCHQ, we wouldn't be who we are today.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on the D.Spot, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode coming soon. Thank you very much.